In March of 1959, the U.S. Army delivered a top-secret document to the highest levels of the American government. The title was Project Horizon. The plan was audacious, expensive, and terrifying. It called for the construction of a permanent nuclear-armed military base on the moon. At the time, the United States had yet to successfully put a man into orbit. The space race was just beginning, and America was losing. But the Pentagon was already planning for the final frontier to become the next great battlefield. The document detailed a fortress on the lunar surface, crewed by a dozen soldiers, defended by atomic warheads, and fully operational by 1966. This wasn't science fiction. It was a detailed military blueprint, supported by some of the most brilliant scientific minds of the era, including the architect of the Nazi V-2 rocket, Wernher von Braun. The document remained classified for over 50 years. When it was finally released, it revealed a chilling vision of the future. A future where the Cold War wasn't just fought on Earth, but for control of the heavens themselves. The race for the moon didn't begin with a president's speech or a nation's dream of exploration. It began in the rubble of World War II. As the Third Reich collapsed, Allied forces scrambled to capture Germany's most valuable asset, its rocket technology. With the V-2 ballistic missile, German engineers like Wernher von Braun had created the first man-made object to reach outer space. The victors of the war knew that combining this rocket technology with the newly developed atomic bomb would create the ultimate weapon. Under the secret program Operation Paperclip, the United States recruited von Braun and hundreds of other German scientists, giving them new homes and clean slates in exchange for their expertise. The Soviets did the same. The Cold War had begun, and a new arms race was escalating. Then, on October 4, 1957, the world changed. The Soviet Union launched Sputnik 1, a polished metal sphere the size of a beach ball, into orbit. The American public was stunned. If the Soviets could place a satellite over American skies, they could deliver a nuclear warhead anywhere on Earth. Morale plummeted. President Dwight D. Eisenhower, facing immense pressure, created NASA in 1958, consolidating America's space efforts under a new civilian agency. But the U.S. Army felt that a civilian agency wasn't enough. For them, space, and specifically the moon, was the ultimate strategic high ground. In March 1959, Lieutenant General Arthur Trudeau, the Army's Chief of Research and Development, proposed a plan so ambitious it bordered on madness: Project Horizon. The goal was simple and direct: establish a permanent military outpost on the lunar surface before the Soviets could. The Project Horizon study was a 118-page document that laid out the military's case for colonizing the moon. Its stated aims were clear and comprehensive. The lunar outpost was required to develop and protect potential United States interests on the moon, to develop techniques in moon-based surveillance of the Earth and space, in communications relay, to serve as a base for exploration of the moon, for further exploration into space, and for military operations on the moon, if required. The urgency of the project was fueled by intelligence reports. The CIA believed the Soviet Union planned to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the October Revolution in 1967 by landing cosmonauts on the moon. The Project Horizon document made the stakes clear. To be second to the Soviet Union in establishing an outpost on the moon would be disastrous to our nation's prestige and, in turn, to our democratic philosophy. The operational concept was breathtaking in its scale. The plan called for 149 rocket launches, 74 Saturn I and 75 Saturn II rockets, to deliver over 220 tons of cargo to the moon. The first unmanned cargo flights would begin in early 1965. By April of that year, the first 2 men would land to begin construction. The base was to be fully crewed with 12 soldiers and declared operational by November 1966, just 7 years after the plan was written. Life on the moon would be a feat of engineering and survival. The plan called for the base to be built underground, using natural caves or trenches excavated by specialized space tractors. The living quarters would be buried cylindrical metal tanks, shielded from meteorites and extreme temperatures. Power would be supplied by 2 nuclear reactors, which, in a detail that highlights the era's cavalier attitude toward radiation, were to be housed in the same building as the soldiers' living quarters. Daily life would be sustained by recycling systems and hydroponic gardens. The report even detailed plans to raise chickens and fish on the moon, using human waste as nutrients. But this was, first and foremost, a military fortress. The base would be defended against a potential Soviet overland invasion. The arsenal was formidable. Unguided Davy Crockett tactical nuclear warheads would be deployed alongside remotely detonated Claymore anti-personnel mines placed around the perimeter. The psychological toll of living in such an isolated and dangerous environment was not overlooked. The plans included a special self-isolation chamber where soldiers suffering from psychiatric episodes could be locked away. The project's total cost was estimated at $6 billion, about $53.5 billion in today's money. It was an astronomical price, but for control of the moon, the Army believed it was a price worth paying. So, a top-secret plan for a nuclear-armed moon base, complete with space tractors, tactical nukes, and a psychiatric ward, all to beat the Soviets to the ultimate high ground. But how much of this was real? The document itself is absolutely real. Project Horizon was a serious proposal, developed by top minds at the U.S. Army Ballistic Missile Agency. The people involved, from General Trudeau to Wernher von Braun, were the architects of America's space and missile programs. The Cold War paranoia and the strategic thinking were very much a product of their time. But the plan was never approved. President Eisenhower ultimately rejected Project Horizon. There were several reasons. The technological challenges were far more severe than the optimistic report suggested. For all their detailed planning, the scientists' understanding of the lunar environment was still primitive. Some early drawings in the report even depicted the astronauts' spacesuits with what looked like ice skates. Priorities were also shifting. The escalating conflict in Vietnam was beginning to drain military resources and attention. Most importantly, the creation of NASA signaled a fundamental shift in America's approach to space. President Eisenhower and later President Kennedy decided that the race to the moon should be a civilian, scientific endeavor. At least publicly, Kennedy's famous 1961 speech framed the moon landing not as a military conquest, but as a peaceful goal for all mankind. The final nail in Project Horizon's coffin was the Outer Space Treaty of 1967. Signed by the US, the UK, and the Soviet Union, it explicitly banned the placement of nuclear weapons or the establishment of military bases on celestial bodies, including the moon. A lunar fortress was now illegal under international law. Project Horizon was a path not taken. It represents an alternate timeline for space exploration, one driven by military strategy instead of scientific curiosity. The plan itself, with its breakneck 7-year timeline and audacious goals, seems almost absurd from our modern perspective. It speaks to an era of ambition and risk-taking that seems to have faded. We have state-of-the-art smartphones, but the dream of living and working on another world feels further away now than it did in 1959. But while the specifics of Project Horizon were relegated to a declassified file, the core idea has not disappeared. The moon is still the ultimate strategic high ground. As new nations and private corporations race back to the lunar surface, the question of its use is more relevant than ever. Will it be a shared scientific outpost for all humanity? Or will it become the next great battlefield? The ghost of Project Horizon serves as a stark reminder that the dream of exploration and the impulse for conquest have always walked hand in hand. The battle for the moon never really ended. It was just postponed. Thank you for staying with us to the end of the video. If you found this video valuable, entertaining, and informative, subscribe to join our ongoing mission, and let's build a community. And take 1 second to hit the like button. It's the single most effective way to help us push this information past the gatekeepers and fight through the noise and algorithm. This is Based Uncovered, where we believe the official story is just the beginning. Until next time, stay vigilant.